Hey folks, this is Kelani. I can't wait to see how this next chapter resolves. There's a huge question mark floating over the last chunk of the Battle for Azeroth pre-patch event. We know the Alliance marches on Lordaeron and we know the Horde is ready to defend it. But what happens at the end? There's another cinematic waiting for us and I just can't wait. I don't think it's going to be the next Warbringer short because that's about Queen Azshara, so maybe we'll get 2 cinematics this week? Keep your fingers crossed. When this video goes live, the North American servers should be only a few hours away from finding out. But while we wait, let's have a look at a topic that I'm becoming increasingly interested in because I'm becoming a terrible altaholic. After playing every class on the beta, I think I'm going to end up leveling quite a few early on and keeping them current as the first raid tier comes out. But Legion was pretty notorious for being quite alt-unfriendly. It seemed like no matter how hard you tried, it took quite a lot of effort and time to try and keep your alts up to date. Most of the time it was pretty difficult simply because of how the Legion systems were working. It felt like any time spent on alts might have been better used on your main character to work towards your next legendary or your next artifact trait. So how do things look in Battle for Azeroth when it comes to alts? How alt-friendly does Battle for Azeroth look so far? One of the most important parts of playing alts in a new expansion is the leveling process, because while you level up your first character, pretty much everything is going to be new. You won't know where to go, what you're going to get asked to do, and most importantly, how each zone's story ends. If something is fresh, new and exciting, you're far more likely to work your way through it, but when you're trying to level up some alts, well, that's where things tend to get a little samey. Back in Legion we had 4 questing zones for 100 to 110, chances are you worked your way through 3 of them at least before hitting max level, or all 4 if you skipped around some of the optional quests. Honestly, you probably ended up experiencing all 4 zones anyways because of rep requirements and major quest lines, but if you left one zone open for alts, at least that's one zone you get to experience for the first time while leveling your second character. In Battle for Azeroth we only have 3 zones to level through. You might be able to squeeze out 110 to 120 in 2 zones if you track down absolutely every single last little optional quest, but that's not going to be very likely. Chances are you'll get through most of all 3 zones before you hit max level, especially if you're more interested in the story. So each alt you level will probably go through the exact same questing experience as your main, which is definitely going to make things drag a little for me personally, but I'm sure I'll be fine. If you hate going through the same quests over and over again, alts might be a bit tedious to level this time around. Of course you could try to change things up by looking at leveling through dungeons or battlegrounds or even island expeditions. We'll get to that later, but questing will probably remain as one of the most efficient methods of leveling. The nice thing about alts though is that they usually go into the new leveling experience with a good chunk of rested experience. Just be sure to log into them after BFA goes live so they can start resting up. That means you might be able to get things done in 2 zones, but clearing all 3 zones, or at least a good chunk of all 3 zones, is actually going to be pretty important for later on. One thing that is interesting about Battle for Azeroth's leveling process is that if you decide to level on the opposite faction, that's an entirely different 3 zones. You can go back and forth between all 6 zones as either faction after you progress through your war campaign, but you won't have proper story quests unless you're on your own island. So Zandalar is for leveling as Horde and Kulturas is for leveling as Alliance. If you play on both factions, you'll get to experience 2 completely separate leveling stories, which is actually really cool. The only downside is that if you don't play both factions, you might feel like you're missing half of the content, but leveling is going to be a trek through the same quests and zones as your main character if you make an alt on the same faction, but making an alt on the opposite faction would be all new quests and journeys. Another huge wall for a lot of alts during Legion was the profession system. You had to level up your alts if you wanted them to have any chance of learning some decent recipes, either to make for yourself or to try and make a few gold. A lot of recipes were locked behind your character level, some were locked behind world quests, which were 110 only, others were locked behind vendors or dungeons, so all in all it was pretty difficult to really do anything at all with your professions if you didn't want to actually level the alt. In Battle for Azeroth that seems to have changed quite significantly. In fact, there are basically no quests tied to crafting professions this time around. You can learn all of your rank 1 and rank 2 recipes at level 110, as long as you get through the intro stuff so you're actually in Zandalar or Kulturas, because that's the only place you can learn the new professions. That means you can do a huge chunk of your desired professions without having to get a single level. You just have to level up your professions. Rank 3s are a different story because they are more or less all tied to reputation vendors, and getting your rep up is going to be very difficult without doing a bit of leveling, but at least you can be useful on alt professions again. again. Gathering professions have different rules. Their ranks are tied to quests, but you won't be limited by your player level, just your profession levels, so you can still go out into the world and level up your mining or herbing on an alt, but you may as well do a few quests while you're at it. So professions are going to be far more alt friendly in Battle for Azeroth, even though leveling to max will still probably be worthwhile. So what about all the other forms of content at max level? Even if you level up a character, there's certain hoops you probably don't want to jump through again. The first of these is the War campaign, which you're going to have to do on every character you level because it unlocks a whole bunch of different stuff. It unlocks the other factions island so you can play in the other 3 zones, it unlocks world quests, island expeditions, warfronts, and even some mythic only dungeons later on down the line. So it's pretty important to get done, and you don't have any catch-up mechanic or skips introduced right now, and I'm not sure you should really expect to see any in the future. The class hall campaigns were sped up in some ways during Legion, but that was mainly where you had to stop and complete 4 or 5 missions before you could continue. The only thing that limits your progress in the BFA war campaign is your character level. If you hit max level, you can do it all as quickly as you can finish the quests. There's no time gates or waiting on missions, so at least there's that. You need to do a little bit more work to unlock world quests though. Towards the end of Legion, if you dinged 110 on an alt, you got your whistle and your world quests unlocked for free. That was a catch-up mechanic which was introduced quite a while after launch, so we might see something similar in Battle for Azeroth, but certainly not for the first few months. Right now you need to complete a good chunk of your war campaign, pretty much just unlocking the other faction's island I believe, and get friendly reputation with your island's factions. That's also not too bad. You should be touching each of the 3 zones you can level through to make sure you get at least enough quests done to reach the friendly mark, so this won't be an issue when you hit max level. And honestly, if you just don't stop for every optional quest, you should get enough story quests done before you hit max level to get friendly rep pretty easily. If this ever becomes a problem for you on alts, just adjust your leveling path to ensure you hit that friendly mark, so there's no catch-up mechanic right away, but honestly I don't think you'll even need it. Island expeditions are also unlocked through your war campaign, but this is actually one piece of content which unlocks for your entire account the first time you work your way through it. You'll be given a little test run on an island to show you how everything works, and after that you can queue up for normal island expeditions on all of your characters level 110 to 120, even characters on the opposite faction. The heroic, mythic and PvP islands are only available at max level though, so you'll need to level any alts up if you want to hop into the higher difficulties. You'll still have them unlocked across your entire account, you just need to do a bit of leveling before you can do anything higher than normal. But that means you can hop into island expeditions while leveling if you really want to. I'm not sure how much experience you'll end up getting though. The other new type of content is the Warfronts, which also unlock through your war campaign. Honestly, most of these unlock really early, so it's not really anything to worry about. Just know it's something you're going to have to get done at least once on your account, more if you want to do world quests and all that jazz. Warfronts also unlock for your entire account. When you've gotten far enough through the war campaign, you'll get a quest to head down to Arathi Highlands to see how Warfronts work. It's a really quick intro quest, and after it's done, you can start queuing up for Warfronts on all of your characters that are max level. Just like the heroic and above islands, Warfronts are locked to max level only, so while you can hop into the easy islands from 110 to 120, there's no version of Warfronts you can try until you get your alts up to 120, but at least you don't have to wait too long after your alts reach max level. The weird thing about Warfronts though is that they aren't always accessible, and we're not too sure when they're going to be first made available, so be sure to keep an eye on the progression and the current state of the Warfront so you don't miss the window when you can actually hop in and have some fun. Now, one of the biggest problems you might face with an army of alts is trying to get them all geared up. Typically, as new patches and new raid tiers open up, some form of gear catch-up usually follows. That's not really true at the start of an expansion, so gearing your alts is going to take the same amount of work as gearing your main for the first few months. If you really don't want to put in a lot of effort into gearing up extra characters, I'd probably wait a little bit for some gear catch-ups to be made available. You can gear up quickly with dungeons, world quests and warfronts, but you're not going to get any gear faster just because it's your second go around the merry-go-round. Something which is fairly important to point out though is the way the new artifact is going to work. The Heart of Azeroth will still require some AP farming, but there's 2 key differences from our artifacts in Legion. The first is that the amulet powers your entire character instead of just one spec, so you don't have to grind AP for 3 different specs for every character you decide to play. The second change is the way artifact knowledge is going to work. Now don't worry, there isn't actually another artifact knowledge that you need to research every week, but periodically the amount of Azerite or artifact power power required to level up your amulet will decrease. This essentially does the same thing as artifact knowledge, except we don't have to keep track of it at all. We don't have to research anything or even pay attention to when it happens, just like towards the end of Legion. So we'll have more time to spread around multiple characters because we don't have to grind for 3 times as long if you want AP for each spec, and when you get around to your ults you can farm up some AP without worrying about which spec you actually want to play the most. It's definitely going to save a lot of time if you're looking at playing several characters when compared to how artifact power worked in Legion, which is a great plus in my opinion. I think that's pretty much everything that might be a pain in the rear when it comes to ults, and overall I think it's looking pretty good, especially when compared to the start of Legion. There's no legendaries to constantly try and farm for, the artifact power is only going to go to 1 artifact instead of 3, professions are looking great if you love having an alt army that you don't necessarily want to level up right away, and the rest is kind of the same old. It's nice that islands open up for an extra activity while leveling after you unlock them on one character too. I think Battle for Azeroth is looking to be pretty alt friendly. The only downside is that you have to work your way through the same quests over and over again, but even that isn't really anything new. What do you think about playing alts in Battle for Azeroth? I think I'll be playing at least 3 characters, quite a lot. 3 sounds like a good number. What about you? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. If you want to hop on that train, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.